record right now, and I will share with you the recording of this session. I will share the slides as well, so that you can share with other peers, or you can always review. So, like I said, my name is Mario Sanchez. I run training here at Sumo Logic. Anything that is technical enablement, so training, documentation. That's our team that actually does that. And you notice that this is the QuickStart webinar, and I also put down at the bottom becoming a Sumo Pro user, which is the level 1 certification. So a little bit of housekeeping before I go too far. Most of you probably registered through this site here. You went to sumologic.training.com, and you probably went here to live courses. And then from here, you actually chose the QuickStart. And you notice that each one of these courses, the Sumo Logic QuickStart, using Sumo and setting up Sumo, is actually paired up with level 1 certification, level 2 certification, level 3 certification. So today, in addition to the QuickStart that you will go through the webinar, plus a few hands-on labs, that should prepare you to be able to take these certifications. And I would highly encourage you to do so. It's going to give you a good sense of what you can do. Plus, the certification itself walks you through some labs that actually help you learn Sumo. So whenever you get a chance, get certified. Level 1, level 2, level 3 for those that are administrators as well is available to you guys. One other thing that I was going to mention that is fairly new that we're doing is for this in-person workshops, we've traditionally ran them at Sumo HQ, which is in Redwood City. But we just launched this Sumo Certification Jam, and we're coming to a few cities around the US, at least to begin with, and then around the world. So actually, I take that back. We're starting with Australia. So we have a couple running in Melbourne and Sydney. We're coming out to Chicago on June 5th. And we are actually coming to New York and Boston later in April timeframe. So if there is a city near you that you guys want us to come to, by all means, let us know. You can email me directly, Mario@SumoLogic, or you can email training@sumologic.com. And we're going to be running these on a quarterly basis, about 2 or 3 of these on a quarterly basis. All right. So with that said, let's get back to the QuickStart webinar. And what are we going to be covering today? Most of you are brand new to Sumo Logic. Some of you have played a little bit with it. So today what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you what are the 5 things that you need to achieve to become a Sumo Pro user. So the first one is understanding how does Sumo Logic help me. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a demo. I'm going to show you how Sumo Logic can help you with your monitoring and troubleshooting. Essentially, you have your metrics, so you can start monitoring things in your environment, but then you want to use your logs so you can start digging deeper and troubleshooting what's going on. So I'm going to give you a demo of kind of the end game, what you want to achieve, what you want to get Sumo Logic to do for you. But then I'm going to step back and say, okay, if you are new to Sumo Logic, how do you identify what data is available to you? How can you start searching and parsing and really getting that analytics insight from your data? And then we're going to pivot into, great, now that I know how to analyze that data, how can I monitor? How can I keep an eye on the trends or the critical events? So we're going to look at alerts and dashboards in there. And the last thing I'm going to leave you with is what's next, what's available to me to go from here. So with that said, here are some pointers. One is the tutorials, which I'm going to point to you as we go through the training. You'll see when we deliver this face-to-face, there's a place where we pause and people can turn to the labs. We don't have that luxury today, but I'm going to certainly point you to those labs. And for those of you who haven't played around in our UI too much, this is the UI, and you'll notice there is a Learn tab here right next to the Home tab. This Learn tab not only has some videos, including a copy of the QuickStart webinar which you're attending, but here's the tutorials that we're going to be referencing. So some of the tutorials that we do in this lab, for labs in this session, are right here, right off the UI itself. Okay, and also I have given you access to our training environment. So you're welcome to do these labs in your environment if you have the data, but if you don't have the data and you don't want to deal with loading that data, you can use our training environment with these credentials and you'll be able to run through the labs without having to upload any data, install any collectors, or any of that good stuff. Next thing is, if you have questions beyond today, you are more than welcome to join the conversation in our community. Again, this is from that same Learn tab. You're able to launch community right here. And you can post questions, you can read previous answers. We also have a Slack channel that you can join where you can post questions. And there's not only Sumo Logic people responding to those questions, but also a lot of other customers which are doing the exact same thing that you guys are doing. So they might have not only the answer technology-wise how to do it, but also the context of how to do them as well. And like I said earlier, level 1 certification, it's an online exam. It's 30 multiple choice questions. It's a 60-minute limit, but most people finish it in about 25 to 29 minutes. So it's not that hard, and I would highly encourage you guys to try it. Okay, so with that said, let's start with a big picture. How does Sumo Logic help me? So I'm going to start with a demo and a little bit of the data flow itself. So you've probably heard of logs, you've heard of metrics, you probably have both in your environment and trying to figure out how do I monitor, how do I troubleshoot with my logs and metrics. What I'm going to walk you through today is sort of this 3 steps of a demo. The first one is I get some sort of alert or some sort of notification that some critical event is happening in my environment. It's 2 a.m. in the morning and something went off. I got a pager, something of that sort. I can receive a Slack alert or an email or PagerDuty, whatever the case might be. And then I want to start monitoring and figuring out what's going on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to first look at metrics, because metrics help me identify the what is going on in my environment. I still don't know why, but I started to identify the symptoms so I can dig in a little bit deeper. So first, we're going to dive into those metrics to identify what is going on in my environment. And then we're going to correlate those metrics to the relevant logs so we can start identifying the why this is happening. I'm going to show you this with a very simple troubleshooting demo. But as I go through this, think how you can enable this in your own environment for the things that you want to keep an eye on, the things that you want to monitor. Okay, so with that said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you this high-level dashboard. This is actually, before I do that, I'm going to show you this fake company here called Travelogic. And Travelogic, what it does is, as some other booking sites online, it allows you to choose to book some flights. It allows you to book some hotel, allows you to book some car. And like many of the modern apps that you guys have built or that you support, this Travelogic is a front end to a modern app, right? I have microservices in the back end. I might have some containers, and as the ops person for Travelogic, I want to keep an eye on what's going on. I really want to understand what's happening with my environment, and it's usually pretty hard because it has a lot of small components to it. So what I have done here is I have created an operational overview dashboard for my Travelogic. You notice that I've also configured some alerts to automatically deliver to the Travel Ops channel in Slack. So if anything is not doing all that great here, I would get a Slack message. What I'm going to do is I'm going to refresh. This is what it looks like on a normal day. Everything is green. I'm going to refresh it because what I did earlier today before you guys joined the webinar is I inserted some errors into my Travelogic site. So it started producing some errors. So if this was the case, let's say this is production and this is real scenario, hopefully I already have a couple Slack messages in my Travel Ops channel. But also, if I'm in my ops center, I would see this dashboard, and I'm starting to see a lot of red in there, and I want to find out what's going on. You notice that this operational overview dashboard, this is kind of a bit of a best practices to share with you. You might consider setting something up like this in your environment. What I have here is a dashboard that is giving me the big picture. I have my service nodes, I have my ELBs, and I'm identifying the 500s in those ELBs. I'm seeing response times from my load balancer. I can see rejects from my VPC network. I can see my database to see if I have any issues on that. If I were an AWS shop, this is my RDS, right? I can see Redis issues. So what I've done here is I've brought kind of at a high level, do I have any errors happening in any of my environments, in any of the critical components that I want to keep an eye on, including if I've broken it up into smaller services. Here's my product service, my checkout service, my queues, my UI, and so on, right? So I've gotten a big picture in here. And if I start seeing some reds, I definitely know that something is going on. So, by the way, all of these panels that I'm seeing in here, I can enlarge them so I can see a little more detail. So this is my VPC network reject. Earlier on, I was pointing out, like, let's look at this one. Here's my checkout service. So customers are trying to check out and pay for their flights, and they're not able to because I'm having some sort of an issue there. So I'm getting about 3,000 errors with my checkout, which is not cool. This means that from a business perspective, I'm certainly losing money. So what I can do now is I can dive into more detailed dashboards. I'm going to click on this checkout service panel. And the way that I've configured Sumo is to drill down into a new dashboard called the services detail dashboard. And this dashboard is going to give me a little more information about what is going on. You notice I'm 4 hours ahead of Pacific time, so that's why the time zone looks a little bit different here. But what I can see in this particular panel in here, let me enlarge it for you by clicking on this little magnifying glass here. What I'm seeing is that I was having the green area is showing me the number of bookings per minute or whatever time frame I have selected. So I'm seeing that I was having successful bookings all the way up to about 10 minutes ago or 15 minutes ago. Everything looked pretty good, bookings. And then all of a sudden I have a big drop in bookings. They're still there. If you notice, they're still behind that orange. I just had a big drop in bookings, and I'm starting to have an increase in my number of fails. So the number of failed bookings has gone up. The number of successful bookings has gone down. Clearly something's going on. This should definitely be worrying to my business because people cannot make their bookings on my system. At the same time, I see that if I look at errors in the last errors for the last 7 days. So what this dashboard is showing me, or this panel is showing me, yesterday at this same time period, I did not have any errors. And the day before, 2 days ago, and 3 days ago, and 4 days ago, and 5 days ago, all the way up to 7 days ago, I really didn't have errors at this particular point in time. So the fact that today I'm having this huge spike in errors is somewhat of an anomaly. So what this dashboard is allowing me, or what this panel is allowing me to do, is see if there's recurring things that are happening, or is this like a one-time deal? And this is what this errors last 7 days is all about. I also can take a peek at my gateway latency, and I see that the average definitely bumped up. As a matter of fact, I'm getting these pink triangles are showing me some outliers. So notice that all that happened around 1:55 or so my time, right? So you notice in here it happened around the same time, and here happened around the same time. My gateway latency delta also, look at that huge spike, because the difference between one time and the other is massive, right? So it's very easy visually for me to identify that clearly something was going on around that same time, a big spike in there. And then this one down here is even showing me a number of errors by node. If I enlarge that, I can see that I have some nodes that are having some issues. And if you notice this one, it says that the travel checkout node 64F something or other is having a huge number of errors. This one over here, another checkout node, is also having a number of errors, whereas my travel worker nodes are, having a few errors, but insignificant compared to what my other errors are having here. So it's very clear from this dashboard and from the previous one that something's going on. I know that now my bookings are having a hard time. The number of errors has spiked. I don't know what the error is, but I can clearly pinpoint it to that checkout nodes are the ones that are having the issue. Let me draw your attention to this top right-hand one. It looks a little bit busy, but let's talk through this one to see what's going on in here. So what I have here is CPU and total memory. Some lines, the dotted lines are showing me memory, whereas the full lines are showing me CPU. And again, everything seemed normal till around 1:55, and then I have this huge spike here in CPU. And again, if you notice that that bubble here that pops up when I hover over the line, it looks like it's my travel checkout nodes again that are having trouble. So what I'm going to do is I want to find out a little more. I'm going to dive into the details of this particular one to find out why CPU is spiking, why total memory is spiking, if at all. So I'm going to click on this little icon in here, and you notice each one of these panels has it. What it allows you to do is, by clicking on it, it allows you to dive into the data behind that panel. So now I'm going into a metrics dashboard, or a metrics panel, a metrics query, if you will. And here are the queries. Here's a query looking for the CPU total. And here's a separate query looking for memory usage. Memory usage is not really giving me any insight. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to toggle it off by clicking on this icon here, so that I can really just focus on CPU. So there you go. CPU is doing great. And then at some point, I had a huge spike in here. I could even just say here that I only want that for that particular node. So I could do something like node equals, right, and just focus on that particular node. But for now, to keep the demo short and move it along, let's just say that clearly I'm having some oops, I didn't mean to do that. That clearly I'm having a big spike in CPU at this point in time. So I've looked at the metrics. Remember this slide that I was showing you? I've looked at the metrics. Now I know that my bookings have a big spike. Not only do I know that the bookings have a big spike, I know that my CPU is having a huge spike right at the same time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go look at the logs for that particular node, because if I have a huge spike in CPU, and if you remember, I also had a big spike in errors. Where is that one in here? I had a huge spike in errors as well. So why don't I go to look at the logs and see what those errors are saying? So what I'm going to do is go back to that same screen that we were looking at before, the one that has my CPU total, and I'm going to overlay my logs on top of my metrics. What I'm going to do is I'm going to run a query. Don't worry too much about this source category. What this is metadata. Every single message gets tagged with some metadata. So I tag my data to be something that is easy for me to know. So my customer service team, travel checkout, which is the one that was having the issues, right? And if I do a quick search on that, what's going to happen is it's going to overlay all the messages that I was having, or at least it's going to give me a sense of how many messages I was receiving at that same time. So notice, I had about 1,000 messages going along, and then all of a sudden, when I have that error, that number jumps to about, in this case, 1,300, and that the darkness of this square tells me that there's a lot more messages going on in there. Well, let me make it a little more interesting. Rather than just looking at all the logs for that, let me just look at the logs, or the error logs, that have the word error in it. So you notice I entered the word error in here. Let me make this a little bit bigger for you so you can see. There we go. So I looked for the word error, and great. This is showing me now that I had absolutely no errors before. And then at around 155, right when I have that big spike, right when I have that issue with my bookings, I'm also having a large number of messages with the word error in it within my logs. So I can do a couple of things. I can click on any one of these boxes, and it's going to serve me up all the errors for that particular box. And then here I can do it. I can do a quick look with. I can eyeball it, and I can see here there's an error. It's saying that I have an SSL routine certificate issue of sorts. Certificate verified failed. I have some error here. I have the same error for the certificate out there. I have some access denied errors. So I could eyeball it and try to figure out what's going on. But that sounds like a bit of a tough thing, because for one, I would have to go to each one of these squares and try to figure out which square probably has the error that I care for. Or what I can do is I can use Sumo Logic's analytics feature. So to do that, what I'm going to do, if you notice it says Shift plus click to open in a search, I'm going to do that. I'm going to do a Shift click. And what that is going to do is it's going to open the same query, source category equals customer service team travel checkout, those for the word error, for that specific time frame. But most of us know that whatever caused the error does not have the word error in it. So I'm going to broaden my search, which most of you would think, oh, that's a scary thing, because now you're going to get a lot of data. As a matter of fact, I'm going to broaden it even more. I'm going to say, just give me the data for the last, I don't know, 30 minutes. So we're going to do 30M, right? And I'm going to go search for all my logs for this travel checkout, which was having the issue, for the last 30 minutes. As a matter of fact, let's choose 45 just in case my time has I need more time. So there it is. I look for all the logs for CS team travel checkout for the last 45 minutes. And since that's a lot of logs, that's actually 45,000 messages, right? That's a lot of messages to look at. Look at this. There's 1,800 pages worth. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this log reduce button, this little easy button here. And what log reduce is doing for me in the back end, and we're going to come back to log reduce later on, but essentially what it's doing is it is looking at all those 45,000 messages and saying, hey, listen, Mario, I have 10,000 of those messages that look very similar. Of course, the date is going to be different, and perhaps the IP address or the transaction ID is going to be different, but the meat and potatoes of that message is so similar that I'm going to lump it all into what we call a signature. I'm going to start categorizing them in signatures. So look at this. It went through those 44,000 messages, or I think I increased the time. It went through all those messages, and it's telling me, now I only have 2 pages. It's telling me it looks like about 7,000 of those messages had this same format. So I can ignore about 7,000 because that's not what I was looking for. But if I look here at the ones that had errors, so here is that same SSL get certificate error. Remember, certificate verified failed. It looks like that error happened about 1,700 times. So I can start easily now going through only, let's see how many, 13 messages. So it reduced those 44,000 messages into 13 signatures that are a lot easier for me to just scroll through. And then more often than not, whatever caused the error is not something with a high count, but it's going to be something with a low count of sorts. And let me just show you something here. So the errors that I was getting is some sort of a bad certificate, some verification that failed. And if I look down here at the bottom, I'm going to chase right to the answer here. I can see that this particular message, which only happened a couple of times, is saying that the Travelogic app is starting. It's starting my checkout cluster. Remember that the checkout was the one that was having the issue? Well, it's showing me that it started that cluster, and it started the version 1.14.dev. If this is a production environment, this is a big issue. It looks like someone just started put development code into my production environment. So to shorten this demo, I'll get to the chase. What happened here is someone put development code in my environment, which has the wrong SSL certificate, which is causing these 1,700 errors to happen because the certificate cannot verify, which is causing my bookings to fail because it can't go through the whole web server situation. And what you saw me do is essentially go back from, okay, now I look at the logs, I identify why this is going on, what happened. I can look at the metrics and say, okay, my bookings were failing because I have that situation. And I now have a clear idea what's going on in my environment, and I can take action. In this case, the action would be, I now need to go and deploy the right version of my stuff in here. So I know that it's very quick and quite rushed to go through this demo, but I hope that it gives you a good sense of how you can set up Sumo to work for you to have the logs and the metrics piece in one place. Okay, one last thing that I'm going to show you. After let's say that I went through that exercise, I identified the errors. One of the things that I would want to do is I would want to set up a panel similar to this one down here at the bottom. Let me show this one for you. What I did here is, after I had that problem occur a couple of times, I created a new panel called deployed versions. And from here, I can see if there's any development versions deployed in my environment. So all of these are production. It looks like I've been having this issue starting today, and it got deployed a couple of times in my 2 nodes. And that should give me a pretty good idea visually that something's going on. I could also set up an alert that shows me that dev is happening in here. Just give me 1 second. Okay, sorry about that. Just wanted to get a drink of water. Okay, so as you see here, this is just one example of how you can set it up. I have an operational overview dashboard that can give me the details of that. All right, I don't see any questions, so I'm going to continue with this. So with that in mind, let me step back a little bit and talk a little bit about the data flow. Clearly what you saw was the end result. You saw Sumo logic completed, you saw everything in place. But in your case, for your environment, and you guys are starting, right, you need to understand how the data flows into Sumo, and you need to create a lot of those dashboards and a lot of those queries that have the answer. So Sumo is broken into three main areas. The first one is data collection. How do we get data into Sumo? And we're not going to cover that today. There's a different webinar for that on Friday that is focused specifically on data collection. Today, we're going to assume that data has already made it into Sumo, and we're going to focus on number 2 and number 3, which is how do I search and analyze my data? How do I work with these operators? How do I chart my data? And eventually, how do I start monitoring and visualizing that data? How do I keep an eye on it through dashboards and alerts, which is what you saw me use in the demo itself. So that's the end game, right? That's what you want to get to. With that in mind, however, I want to talk a little bit about data collection just so you guys get a full picture of getting the data to Sumo. So sending the data to Sumo, or what we call it internally, ingesting data into Sumo, can be done in 2 major ways. It can be done with what we call cloud-to-cloud collection, which is shown on the top of this diagram in here. For example, you can say send data from your S3 buckets, your CloudTrail data, your CloudFront data, your RDS data. You can send it over to Sumo. You can do cloud-to-cloud collection from Akamai, CDF, and WAF services. We also have APIs to other SaaS and PaaS platforms like Google Apps and Office 365, as you see here. We even have some clients that are doing HTTPS posts straight to us so that we can grab that data as well. The second way of collecting data is through installed collectors. And here's some examples of those. You can have a collector installed in each one of your machines, in which case that collector sends data over to Sumo. Or if you already have some centralized infrastructure, you can use that. You can have a collector that gets sent data from each of the machines using SSH or WMI. That collector grabs the data and forwards it on to Sumo. And similarly, if you have network devices like firewalls and routers, you can syslog that data over to that collector and onto Sumo logic, right? So the good news is we can grab data from just about anything, structured or unstructured data. It doesn't matter. We'll take that data and we'll index it for you. Now, the one thing that you do need to know today is that as we are receiving that data, as Sumo is collecting that data, we actually stamp that data with 5 very key metadata tags. And here they are. One is the name of the collector. Whatever you call that collector, we will stamp that name on the data so that we know exactly what that data is coming in. Source host is the next one. Whatever your source host happens to be, we're going to stamp that data with the source host itself. The next one is the source name. So if that data is coming from a file, we will stamp it with the file name and even the path of where that log file is. This is just to help for those of you who are used to looking at file names, so we can stamp it that way. Source, let's say that you are pulling in Apache data. We can pull in Apache Access or Apache error data. So source allows you to differentiate that. And the last one here, source category. It can be anything you want. As you see here, it can be freely configured. Therefore, is the main data tag we use. I'm going to show you right now in an example how we can use source category. As a matter of fact, let me jump into a training instance and show you exactly that right now. What we can do is, give me just 1 second. I need to close this tab and just go here. Just to keep it simple for now, I'm going to open a search tab. And let's say that you notice in here, let me make this bigger for you. You notice in here, when I start a search, I can search by collector, by source, source category, source host, even source name. There's a couple that we talk about in future webinars, like index and view. But for now, let's use source category. So I can use something like labs, Apache Access. And in that case, it's going to pull all the logs, it's going to pull all the logs for the source category labs Apache Access. And I can get pretty fancy in terms of how I search for this. I'm going to get to that later on, but just know that everything gets stamped, and that's how you're going to be pulling your data. Okay, let's talk about, let's say you're brand new. There's a few of you, like half of you are brand new to Sumo. Let's say that your system is up and running already, data is already flowing, but you don't know what data is available to you. How do you go about and understand what data is available? So I'm going to show you two ways of finding out what data has already been collected. The first one, the official way, and then the second one is a bit of a cheeky query that I'm going to show you how to run. So let's talk about the first one. You want to go to manage data and you want to go collection, and then you can see all collectors that have been set up. So let me just go to my environment in here. Again, I'm going to go into manage data and I'm going to go into collection. For those of you who are administrators, similar to me, you will have all these links enabled. For those of you who are not administrators, you still can see all the different collectors, but you will not have access to edit them, change them, or even create new ones out here. So what does the screen show me? Let me get rid of this so I can show you a little more information. What this is showing me is all my collectors and the different sources in my collector. So let me show you here. I have a collector called the Artifactory collector. It's a hosted collector, meaning it's cloud to cloud. Here is all the different sources that collector has. So I'm pulling Artifactory Access data, Artifactory request, server traffic. Here's another one. Let's look at this one. Here's my here's a collector called AWS Services, and through that AWS Services collector, I'm pulling in CloudFront, CloudTrail, ELB, config, Lambda, S3, SES, VPC. All that data I'm pulling in through this one collector. So this is just a great way to see all the collectors that have been set up and the different sources that they have. You can always search. What if I was looking for CloudTrail data? I can just enter the word CloudTrail, and it's going to bring back all the collectors that are pulling in CloudTrail data, as you see here. I just happen to have a few. This one called Labs AWS Services, and this one called AWS Services. And all of those are pulling in my CloudTrail data. All right, so this is one way. The other cool thing about searching this way is that I can always launch a query right from here. So in this case, I'm pulling in Labs AWS CloudTrail data. If I click on this icon, it's just going to open a search, and it's going to go and search that query for a default of the last 15 minutes. So it shows me how I can create a query for that as well. All right, the second way of finding out which data sources are available to you is you can run this cheeky query, star count by source category. So let me show you how to do that. Again, I'm going to open a new search, and I'm focusing on logs for now, but I'm going to do give me everything. That's what star means. Just give me everything. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to pipe that message and say, I want you now to count by source category, because I want to see what source categories I'm getting and category. And I also want to see which of those are sending me most data in here. So in this particular case, I see that I have about 3 pages, but in short, I can show you that most of the data that I'm receiving seems to be my firewall semantic data. I'm getting some travel products data. I can see some lab snorts and so on. So all this data is coming into my system. And if I wanted to now search for something, I know exactly what the name of that source category happens to be. So just a nice little cheeky query that lets you see all your source categories, in addition to a count of how many messages have been received in the last 15 days. All right. So let's look at this. So let's say that your boss then says, "Okay, great, Mario. This is pretty cool that you now have Sumo Logic installed. What we really need to do is we need to start looking at our let's say our Apache web servers. Can you help me analyze what our Apache web servers are doing? How are they faring? Are we getting a lot of 404s? Are we getting a lot of errors, client or server errors?" So I'm going to show you the first thing that you should do is, for one, I could start just hacking away. Let me close some of these queries that I have here. I can start hacking away at all my data. Like, for example, here's all my Labs Apache Access data that I showed you that I searched before. Or if I already have other folks, other peers that have been working with this data, maybe I can go see what they have built. Perhaps they already have some data out there. So I'm going to show you, for one, is how can I go search the organization for any content that has already been searched. So let me show you that. I'm going to go in here into this little folder that is in here. Oh, actually, I was doing this earlier. Let me show you how it looks normally. This is what it looks normally. This is all the data that is out there, including my own personal folder, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But I can say, by the way, show me everything that has the word Apache. And it'll come back and it'll bring folders, it'll bring dashboards, it'll bring queries. Essentially anything where it found the word Apache, it came back. And so if my boss had asked me, hey, can you go and find out where our visitors are hitting us from? I know that our Apache data has IP addresses. Well, look at this. There is a dashboard that someone already built called Apache Visitor Locations. And if I open that dashboard, I can see a lot of information of where our traffic is coming from. And I'm done. In less than 3 minutes, I found something that was built and I'm done, right? I don't have to go and recreate the wheel. The pretty cool thing about finding someone else's work is that you can always reverse engineer it. So this is a dashboard, right? I can always, let's take this top one here. It's a worldwide dashboard. What I can do is I can click on this little icon as I showed you before, show and search, and I can see exactly how that dashboard was put together. I can see the search query for that dashboard. Of course, for most of you that are brand new to Sumo, this means absolutely nothing, but it will. By the end of today, by the end of these, in an hour's time, you will know what all this stuff is. But for now, don't worry about it. The cool thing is that you can go in here and figure out that you can always reuse some of the dashboards in here. This right now is showing me a map. I can look at a table view. And what if I only wanted those hits from China, right? So country name equals China. I don't know this syntax. I don't know it all that well, but what I know is I can use a where clause. I can just go in here and say where country name equals China, right? We all know how to do that, right? So without knowing much syntax and much about this stuff, I can easily tweak a query. Now I'm getting only those hits that are coming from China. I can go back to my map. And my map is going to be focused just on China, and it's going to be showing me the hits that I'm getting from that particular location, as you see here in this map. I'm going to have to zoom out quite a bit because it was just one area. So anyway, you get the point. I can tweak the stuff that is already there, and I can use it even for learning purposes as well. We'll go to a little more about tweaking and changing things. But for now, know that one of the first things that you would want to do is, let me find out if my peers have already done something similar. All right. The second way is, great. I still have this problem because I'm the first one to start using Sumo. I loaded my Apache Access data, but I don't even know how to start analyzing. Well, what I would do if I were you is I'd check out the app catalog. What the app catalog is our nice friends in product and engineering have actually created a lot of content, out-of-the-box content for a lot of the common sources. So if you're an AWS shop, you're in luck. Here's a CloudTrail, AWS config, ELB, and so on. Here is, if you are in the security space, there's some, as a matter of fact, I can see them from here, compliance and security. Here's some apps that are specific to compliance and security, right? Like AWS Foundation Benchmark. I can see audit logs. I can see audit stuff as well. What if you are looking at operating system specific stuff? You can get metrics for the specific host. Or in my case, I'm looking at web servers. So there's the Apache web server. So what I'm going to show you is, if I were to install this app, it's going to install all these queries and it's going to install all these dashboards for me. And that's pretty cool because now I don't have to start from scratch. I can even preview those dashboards from here if I don't want to install them right off the bat. But might be a little too small for you guys to see, but these are the dashboards that it's going to install for me. So let me do exactly that. Why don't I add to the library this Apache app? I'm going to call it Apache March, since today is the March 2018, so that we know which is the folder that we're going to put it in, or the name of it. And what it's asking me is, listen, Mario, how do I know what your Apache data looks like? What is the source category for that? So what I can do is I can go find my my labs Apache Access. And if you guys remember, it was labs Apache Access. So I'm specifying that right here. Click Add to Library. And what it's doing right now is it's creating a new folder, and it's copying those dashboards. It's copying those queries into my personal folder. You notice in the library under my personal folder, I have a new folder called Apache March 2018. That took me 5 seconds to install, and now I have my own version of stuff. So I can open my Apache overview. Again, this is analytics I'm doing on my Apache data without even knowing how to use Sumo Logic yet. I haven't even looked at syntax. I haven't played with that kind of stuff, but I'm already getting a lot of value out of it. I can see responses over time. So look at this. It's showing me successes, client errors, redirects, server errors, and it's showing me a breakdown over time. It's showing me traffic distribution by server, traffic volume by server, and this is just one of the dashboards. If I go back to my folder here, to where was it? I think it was my personal folder Apache. I have all these queries to work through. I have these dashboards. Let's look at this one, Apache Web Server Operations. Here's one for my the ops for my web server. And it's just loading my data into these, and I can see where my locations are. As a matter of fact, where my 400 locations are coming from. I can see server errors over time, the top 10 bots that it observed, top 5 clients causing IP addresses, and all that good stuff. So again, I didn't have to do a whole lot except install the app, and I'm already getting value out of seeing all this metrics, all this logs data out there. Yes, it's true. It might not be 100% what I need, but it certainly gives me 80, if not 90 or 95% of what I need. And now I can use these for learning. Let's say that here's my server errors. What if I wanted to keep an eye on my client errors as well? Let's do this. Let's be cheeky. Let's go look at the back end of this dashboard, of this panel. So here is the one that I was looking at, right? Which gives me it gives me 500s and 503s. What if I wanted to look at my client errors, which are the 400s? Well, it's pretty easy because all I have to do is go change. As a matter of fact, I would just do this because I want to see my 404s, or I could even get rid of that. The reason for that is because I have another line down here that says where status code matches for something. So this is going to go and find me anything that matches 400s. I can change my time period if I wanted to as well. And there you go. In less than 3 minutes, I was able to borrow a dashboard or a panel that existed for my client errors or my server errors, sorry, and I change it to be my client errors. I'm looking at the errors over time. And if this is what I like, I can now save this query as my own query. I could even update that dashboard because now I want it to show this client errors instead of server errors, or I can add this to a completely different dashboard if that's what I wanted. So not to this particular, not the dashboard that it came from, but a whole new dashboard altogether. All right. So what I've been showing you is the fact that you can do a lot of analytics without even digging deep into the Sumo Logic syntax. Here's where we normally would break for people to try some of the labs. So when you're on your own, I would highly suggest just try these tutorials. You can complete the part here. It's going to show you how to identify data available, very similar to what I just ran you through, and how to install a Sumo Logic app. Now let's say that, okay, so let's say that we didn't find any dashboards for Apache. Let's say that there is no apps for Apache. And really, what I wanted to do is I wanted to start analyzing my Apache Access data. There is no dashboard for it out of the box. There's no apps. And yeah, I need to analyze this stuff. So how do I do it? So the first things first, use metadata when you're searching. I'm going to make this just a little bit bigger for you guys so that you can see it well. Okay, so source category equals lab Apache Access allows me to search for things. I could have starred this as well. And what this is doing is it's looking for labs Apache Access and labs Apache error. So you notice, remember how I was talking about source category can be freely configured? This allows me to do that kind of stuff. What if I wanted all data from dev, prod, labs, and that kind of stuff? I can do this as well. This is bringing me Apache Access data from my production environments, from my dev environments, and then whole 9 yards. So you can get away with wildcards. What if I only wanted Lab Apache Access data that had the word Mozilla in it? I can do this. And Mozilla, it's going to only bring me those messages in the last 15 minutes that have the word Mozilla. And similar to the other one, I can also use wildcards here. I can say Mozilla star, and it's going to bring back the same stuff, right? Okay, let me talk a little bit about this time period, this time range thing. So I can use the default ones here, 15, 60, 3 hours. But what if I wanted 45 minutes? I think you guys already saw me do this. I can do minus, oops, sorry about that. I could do minus 45M, which would give me the last 45 minutes. I could also do something like this, minus 45 through minus 30 minutes. What is this doing? This is giving me 15 minutes worth of data, but starting 30 minutes ago. So from minute 45 to minute 30. And this little blue bubble here, fortunately, shows me exactly what it is that I'm searching. If you guys wanted to do hours, this is pretty straightforward, right? Minus 1 hour, minus 1 minute, minus 1 day. So hours, days, minutes, seconds. But what if I wanted to choose a very specific time frame? Excuse me, you can click on custom. You can go back to the time period that you want. Say, let's say I want it from March 1st through March 5th at 2 a.m. or 8 p.m. or whatever the case might be. Here, I can just do this in here, enter the time frames, click apply, and now this is showing me that it's going to go from midnight on the 1st through the 5th at 8 p.m. You can run that query and of course get the same the results for that time period. Okay, keep it simple for now. I'm just going to go to relative, go to 15 minutes. Actually, let me go to like 60 minutes to make it a little more interesting. And now I'm pulling 60 minutes worth of data for those same for that same time period in here. All right, so if I start looking at the data, which most of us are probably fairly familiar with Apache data, I see an IP address, I see a timestamp, I also see a method, and then I see URLs. Oh, here's the status code, right? What I probably would want to know is, oh, here's a 304, there's a 200. I want to find out, am I having a lot of 404s? Am I having a lot of failed either server errors or client errors, like I saw in that previous piece, right? So I'm going to show you what is it that you have to do to start getting this data, to start giving structure to that data. And I'm going to show you the easy way, and I'm going to show you several other ways. What I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight a message, and I'm going to use it as an example. So I'm going to highlight this message, and I'm going to say I want to parse the selected text. So I'm going to tell it, you find the word get. And if you find the word get, grab anything in between the word get and the word HTTP, and I want you to call that a URL. So I'm just creating variables. Grab anything between spaces after that and make that my status code, right? And then grab anything after that, and that's going to be my size. So what I'm doing is I'm using a message as an example, and then I am taking the fields and starring them, so they're variables, and I'm just giving them a name in here. And to keep it simple, I'm going to grab everything else between those quotes, and I'm going to say that's my user agent. And so look what happens now. If I click submit, what it did is it created that parse statement for me. I could have typed it myself, but it's a little easier when the UI does it for you. So what it's doing is it says, listen, go find this pattern. And if you find that pattern, extract or parse out the following fields from it: the URL, the status code, size, referrer, and user agent. Let's run this query now, and let's see what happens. Here it is. Here's my results down at the bottom. Let me make this a little bit bigger so you guys can see. The message is still here on the right-hand side. Here's my message. But look, on the left-hand side, there is the user agent, which has been parsed out. There's the URL. There's the status code. There's the size. There's the referrer. Pretty cool, because now I'm extracting all those fields. And why would I want to do that? Well, because now I could do something like count by status code, which is what I was looking to find out in the first place, right? So I can get a good idea of the counts of my status codes. And fortunately for me, Most of my status codes are 200s as I expected, so everything is good in here. But you start to see how you can parse things out, and parsing is going to become very important because that's what gives you the structure so you can start analyzing your data. Now, I showed you the simple one, which is called parse anchor. Let me go in here and just open our documentation. Again, I'm going to that Learn tab that I'm going to show you quite a bit later on. There's cheat sheet here. There's that documentation. You can get into training and quite a few things from here. Let me go to our docs. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to search for the various parsing operators that we have so I can show you the other options. Parse operators. Okay. So here is a whole bunch of parse operators. So I just showed you how to use anchor parsing because we have a predictable pattern. It just so happens that the Apache logs are very predictable, and so therefore I can use parse anchor. I can use this UI to show it how to build it. If you remember, I said you will always find, oh, where was it? It was here. You will always find the word get. You will always find the word HTTP, and whatever's in between, go grab it. And that's what I want you to do. So it's very, very, very predictable. Therefore, I can use parse anchor. But what if you cannot predict what your log message is going to look like? Then you can use variable patterns. You can use regex for variable patterns. So most of you, if not everybody here, has used regex in the past. As a matter of fact, let me grab this one here, just straight from the UI, from the docs example, and just paste it in my query and talk about it as I go. I'm going to put it right after my query here, just paste it and run it. What this one is doing is saying, listen, go find this pattern, which is 1 to 3 digits followed by a period, 1 to 3 digits, a period, 1 to 3 digits, a period, 1 to 3 digits. That sounds like an IP address, right? So go find that pattern. If you find it, store it in a field called IP address. That's all that it's saying. And there it is. So here's my other fields, user agent, URL, status code, and there's my IP address. So I just parsed out the IP address. This is showing you a couple of things. One is it's showing you that you can have multiple parse statements. And the second thing that it's showing you is it's showing you that they don't have to be the same kind. This is a parse anchor. This is a parse regex. And now because, and I'm going to show you one more thing. I parsed, let's say, size from here, but I'm parsing IP address from a different one. I could do something like, let's say, average size. So I want to get the average size by IP address. So, oops, if I knew how to spell, make it a little easier, IP address. So I'm just showing you that you can combine. It doesn't matter how or where you parse those fields. They're available to you, and you can do stuff like that. Here's my IP addresses, and here's the average size of the message by IP address, if you wanted to as well. Or average size by, I don't know, URL, or whatever you want in here. Okay. I don't see any questions yet, so I'm going to continue. I'm hoping this is making sense for you guys. Great. So let's go back to our example where I was doing, I was doing a count by source status code, right? Remember that? I was running and saying, oh, cool, I can see my status codes in here. Actually, sorry about that. I didn't finish talking about all the different options for parsing. I'm not going to go through and show you all of them, but I'll talk to them. If you're sending us JSON formatted logs, guess what? We know what that looks like. As a matter of fact, I think I had AWS CloudTrail data in here. All I have to do is say JSON auto, and guess what's going to happen? It's going to parse. Oh, Jason, come on, JSON auto, and it's going to go parse out all these messages into fields that it's going to recognize. Where are they parsed? I don't see them in here. Actually, they get parsed in this little area that we call the field browser. So you notice there's AWS region, which is one of the fields that was in here. So now I could do something like count by AWS region, because AWS region is now a field that's available to me, and I can see a count of messages by AWS region, as I see here. All right. So quite a few options in terms of parsing. Key value pair. If you're sending us your data with name equals Mario, company equals Sumo Logic, then we know what that looks like. CSV format, we know what that looks like. XML and so on. There's a few options that I won't get to cover today, but for those of you joining tomorrow, we'll cover some of these other parsing options. Now, by this time, I'm usually getting the question of, hey, Mario, listen, this is great, but honestly, every time I'm looking at the Apache data quite often, and I don't want to be writing these parse statements every time. As a matter of fact, I don't want to be copying and pasting them. Isn't there a way to like store these as rules? And the answer is yes. We have something called the under manage data settings, we have something called field extraction rules. And these rules do exactly that. They help you extract fields. So these are rules to help you extract fields. And there is one right here. Look, there's an Apache Access one. Let me tweak it or edit it so you can see how it was built. What this is saying is, listen, for any message that you find out there, as the data is getting ingested, if it matches this source category, star Apache Access, I want you to do this parsing for me. And again, this is happening at the time that the data is ingested. So the cool thing is when you go and run your queries, that data has already been parsed out for you. So no need to do any parsing. Let me show you exactly that. I'm going to go back to my search. Remember my search that I was doing here? Look at this. I'm going to get rid of these parse statements that I have in here. And I will still be able to count by status code. Why is that? Because there already is a field extraction rule that is parsing out status code for me. Remember that I had done another query that was something like, what was it? Average size by URL, There you go. I can run that same exact query because URL is a field and size is a field that has already been parsed. But where are those fields? How do I find out what fields have been parsed? Well, two places. One is I could go here and look at the field extraction rules that have been set up and look at the fields that have been added or parsed out. Or I can just run a quick search for that data. And in the field extraction, in the field browser that I was talking about earlier, there it is. Here's source IP, status code, URL, user agent, all the different fields that I wanted to parse out there. Okay, so parsing is very, very key. I'm gonna, if there's anything that I want you to leave with today is that you should go and try to set up your field extraction rules. It's an administrative function, but if you cannot do it, you should work with someone to set up those field extraction rules for you. All right, let's briefly go into a little bit more of the analytics in here. So what I'm doing, I kind of ignored the slides in here, but what I'm doing is I'm showing you that query syntax, and I'm walking you through the fact that you can do metadata plus keywords. I'm showing you that you can parse as well. And once you parse, you can start filtering your data. You can start aggregating your data. So I'm just going to show you some of those examples of what you can do with this kind of stuff in here. Okay, so one of the main ones that I get is count by status code. It's great. I get a count for the last 60 minutes, but what if I want to see trends over time? I don't know if these 404s, these client errors that are here, are these happening all in minute number 7, for example, or are they spread across evenly? So I'm going to show you an operator that is very, very common to use, and it's called time slice. And as the name suggests, what time slice allows me to do is it allows me to create buckets of time. So for example, these 60 minutes can be broken into 5-minute buckets. So I'm going to have 12 buckets of 5 minutes each. And now I can not only count by status code, but I can count by time slice as well. You'll notice that I put an underscore in front of this. The reason for that is because when you have an operator, the outcome of that operator is, let's say we did a count by status code, the outcome is an underscore count. So if I'm asking for a time slice, the result of that time slice is an underscore time slice. So now I broke data into 5-minute buckets, and I'm counting them by 5-minute buckets and by status code. And there it is. What this is saying is that for status code 401, at 10 a.m., I had these many. For 401 at 1025, I had this many. And I can sort them by status code, I can sort them by time, or I can even look at what the highest counts and the lowest counts were. But let me show you one other operator that is very key for when you're trying to look your data. This one's called transpose. And as the name suggests, it's very similar to what you use for, it's very similar to what you do for your Excel pivot tables, right? You essentially say, I want to turn this list into a table. That list that is at the bottom left is pretty hard to read. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to turn it into a table. And now I can see a better, easier way to read this, right? For 10 a.m., I had these many messages for these particular error codes in here. And you can look down the line and see exactly the same, right? Okay, so now going from something like this to a chart is as easy as clicking on whatever chart you want to get. So it makes it pretty simple for you to do this. As a matter of fact, let's play with this one. Let's do this bar chart. Let's say that this bar chart, I don't want those 200s because they're overpowering, and let's get rid of those 304s. Okay, so I got rid of the 200s and 304s. It's only temporary because I'm just doing it here. What if I wanted to get rid of them from the query perspective? It's as simple as going in here and adding a where clause. You remember that? I could say where status code equals 200 or status code equals 304. And since I don't want those, I'm just going to put a bang in front of that. And that just says I don't want those guys in here. I could have also used another operator, the in operator. As a matter of fact, I think I had it somewhere here to show you. Maybe not, but oh, I thought I did. Anyway, the in operator can say where status code in 200, 304. So there's a few ways that you can go about doing this, but now my query doesn't have those operators. Now, I did this on purpose, which is not the best way to do it, so that I can show you something different. What's happening here is I run a query, and let's say that I get 1,000 messages. Those 1,000 messages get sent to this line in here. And then they get filtered down to, let's say, 200 messages, because now I don't want these guys. So now those 200 messages get sent to here and eventually to the next one and eventually all the way to the bottom. But wouldn't it be better to just filter right at the top? So in reality, what we should have done is put it right here and not status code 244. Why? Because this is going to ensure that it's only pulling those 200 relevant messages that we care for, and so we're bringing in less data that we need to. So the more filtering you do on the first line, the better your performance is going to be for the queries, because you're pulling in less data. All right, I'm going to leave you with something very quick here, just to show you that every one of these charts in here has a lot of options that you can play with. And unfortunately, we won't get to play with all of them today, but let's take a peek at this one. I'm going to change the series, and I'm going to make my 404s be a line chart, and maybe my 500s also be a line chart, right? And click on save. So what I'm doing, what I'm showing you now is I'm showing my client and my errors, my client and my server errors in relation to all the other errors by highlighting them in this particular way in here. Okay, so I've shown you the syntax itself. Let's go back to a query that we pulled. Let's see, this one. Remember this query that I pulled from the that I pulled earlier from a dashboard that already existed. Hopefully, this makes sense now for you. Listen, I'm pulling source category /Apache. Then I'm doing some parsing. I'm parsing the IP address. Then I'm parsing the URL, the status code, the size. And then in case there is slightly different variation, I'm pulling that again, because if you notice here, there could be a longer refer. Excuse me. So all that those parse statements are doing is they're just parsing out the fields that I care about. In 1 second. I'm just going to take a drink of water. Give me 1 second. Okay, I'm back. So what you notice is this query is parsing out those fields, which, guess what? If we have a field extraction rule, we don't even need that. We could get away without having all this parse statement. Look, much simpler query. Then I'm saying where status code matches that, so I only want the 400. Then I'm time slicing by 5 minutes, which means I'm breaking it down to smaller buckets. And then I'm doing a count. And last but not least, I'm doing a transpose. This looks very, very similar. Apart from this where statement, this looks very similar to the query that we just put together in here, right? So I told you, by the end of today, you were going to be able to know exactly what this query here was doing. Oops. I tried to make the query a little different. Okay, so going back to the slide. So I've shown you that you start the query with your metadata, you some keywords, you can parse it, you can filter it, you can aggregate that data, and then you can do some sort of formatting. You can just specify which fields you want to show, you can transpose it, you can format some of the dates and so on in there. I'm not going to be able to show you everything because we're running out of time, but I do want to show you a pretty cool tool called Livetail. And as the name suggests, you probably already figured out what it does. It allows me to tail your logs. But here is the really cool thing. Let me just copy here. I'm going to cheat so I don't have to type it. I'm going to open a Livetail session. And what it allows me to do is it allows me to tail using my metadata. So in reality, I'm not just doing a Livetail from one web server. I'm using a Livetail from all my web servers. So if I have 30 web servers, all of those are sending the data to me because I can send it here. And I can even say, and I only want the logs that have the word Mozilla in it. And by the way, I want you to highlight the word 404 and 503 and I don't know, and Mozilla as well. Why not? So you can do this kind of fancy stuff, right? Here are the logs that I'm getting that have the word Mozilla. I can jump to the top, I can jump to the bottom, I can identify what are the error messages and the IP addresses that they're coming from, and perhaps I want to find out what operating system they're using and whatnot, because I'm tailing from all my logs right in that particular moment. Now, this screen, this tail tool, Livetail, is obviously not going to let me do all that fancy stuff that I was doing before, like aggregation and counting and all that stuff. For that, I would just go in here and say, I want to show this in a search. And what it's going to do is it's going to run the same exact query, but in the search tab for the last 15 minutes. The last thing about Livetail, this is a great tool, especially if I'm a developer and I don't even have access to production environment. Now, all of a sudden through the UI, I can do this. But what I wanted to talk about was that there is also a command line interface for Livetail, which makes it really easy and convenient if I just want to install this this command line interface and then run queries from my desktop, from my own machine. You would obviously have to download it from GitHub, do a little bit of a handshake with an access key. But once you've got it running, you can do things like that. I can say, run Livetail, find source category, prod my app, and only those words that have the word, publish or delete. Or you can even do things like this, run Livetail, source categories because Apache Access, and then pipe that into grep. You can combine your commands and just grep it and then drop it into like a standard, an out.txt file if you wanted to as well. So CLI, very, very popular amongst our users. Or Livetail in general is very popular amongst our users, and CLI is definitely a tool that you can benefit from. Okay, so I've shown you quite a lot of stuff today. I've shown you how to start analyzing your data. What I won't be able to show you is all these other advanced options, which we will for those of you who are joining tomorrow. But there are some out there, some operators that make it pretty easy to do things like lookups against latitude and longitude, so you can map those IP addresses, or start identifying outliers, things that don't have things that are out of the norm, or predict what's happening with your servers. I showed you today in the demo how to use log reduce. There's another one called log compare, which runs a log reduce now and a log reduce in the past and compares those two. So a few other options out there for how to start analyzing your data, which we're going to dive deeper into tomorrow for those of you joining. Again, I would suggest you try the tutorial. It's going to walk you through some labs for searching and parsing, aggregating. It's going to be very, very similar to the exercise that I just showed you. So I have about 15, 20 minutes so I can leave some time for questions. But let's talk about monitoring your data. So how do you monitor your data? Well, there's two ways. One is through dashboards. And dashboards are super, super simple to build. Essentially, dashboards are a collection of panels, and those panels are made up of data. So let me show you how to build it. Let's take what we've already built. I'm going to take this search that is in here. Remember this search that we built? And I'm just going to say add to a dashboard. And it's going to say, great, what do you want to call your panel? How about Apache errors? And then it says, what dashboard do you want to add this to? I can choose a dashboard that already exists by clicking on their name. Or if it's a brand new dashboard, I can, let's not call it my name. Let's call it new dashboard. So I'm going to create a new dashboard called new dashboard. Not all that interesting, but I have. And it's going to ask me, where do you want to put that dashboard? Here's all your data. Here's your personal folder. I'm just going to put it in there, in that personal folder. Click on add. And as you would expect, I have a brand new dashboard with just one panel. Kind of boring, but that's what I built. It's really easy to monitor, to edit. I just drag the panels and it's just going to go and build it, right? So there is my one panel out there. There's a couple of things I can do to this dashboard. Let's start from here under actions. I can add non-data panels, meaning I can add a title. This is my first dashboard, right? A title itself. My goodness, today's typing is suffering. I could have added also a text panel. These are pretty important because you might be the one who created this dashboard, but it could be someone else consuming the data, right? So you can put your text in here. This is in Spanish. That's why you guys don't understand what it's saying. but here's the detail, right? I can even add links to other dashboards. So let's say I want to put a little link here to another dashboard. Click submit, and it's going to add that stuff. And it's as easy as just dragging around. So I can grab this stuff. Maybe I want to put my my title here up at the top, and then I can drag this one in here. And there you go. As simple as that. I just created a new dashboard that has a couple of panels. Some panels are more interesting than others, but it was as simple as that. I can add another one. Let's say I'm going to take this one. Remember this one that already exists? I could update the original dashboard where it came from, or I can add it to a new dashboard. Oh, you know, it doesn't find the query that I had in here. Let's see if I do Command C. Oh, okay, it can't find the query I had. So let's just take this. I'm going to show you that you can add tables as well. I'm going to add it to a dashboard. I'm going to call it, let's call it AWS region. I'm going to add it to my new dashboard, where it is. Was it called new? New dashboard. Click on add, and you can add tables as well to your dashboards. There you go. It was as simple as that. And I'm just going to add one more. I'm going to go, as a matter of fact, I'm going to cheat. I'm going to go in here to my favorites, and I'm just going to open, how about this one here, outlier. Here's a query using outlier. I'm going to run that query, and then I'm going to plot it as a line, and I'm just going to put that to my dashboard in here. So add it to my new dashboard. There we go. So you notice how it was very simple to add a dashboard. Essentially, you find the query that you want, or you create the query itself, and then you just add it to a dashboard, and I can keep adding as many panels as I want in here. A couple of options. One is I can toggle themes. So you guys saw some black theme dashboards. A lot of our users like those. I can also delete the dashboard. I can start. I can make it a full screen and so on. Data access level means if there are people who have restricted access, do I want to share them? Do I want to share the dashboard with them with a different access to data itself? This is how I can refresh my dashboard by clicking on this icon, or I could also choose a different time frame for all my panels, or I can choose different time frames for individual panels in here, and that's going to refresh it. But probably more important to show you today is the fact that I can share my dashboard. So let me just show you the icon that I clicked in here. I click on this little icon, and it allows me to share this dashboard with different people in my organization. I can share it with everyone in my organization, or I can share it with analysts, I can share it with administrators, or if I have groups like business units, I can share it with the marketing team or the finance team or whomever I want to specifically share it with. And then I can even specify what kind of access they get, a view, edit, or manage. If I give them manage access, then we all co-own that dashboard and we can actually all edit it and make changes to that dashboard as well. So sharing is caring. I would highly suggest that as you create content, share it with others because they will benefit from that. Two more things I want to show you. You can add filters to your dashboard. So since I'm editing this dashboard, I can add a filter. For example, I can say, let's just choose what would be a good filter, AWS region. Let's say that I wanted that we had different administrators for the different regions. We can tell them, oh, here, enter your AWS region. And what that would do is it would just allow, it would serve as a template, and whomever came here, they can enter their region. 1, 4, 5, 6. Let's say that this was an actual region. They could enter their region, and that would allow this dashboard to get reset. Of course, only the ones where that filter pertains, to show you data for that particular filter. Obviously, we don't have filter 1, 2, 4, 6, so that one is not showing. But you have the ability to add filters to your dashboard so you can share with others. All right. So, the last thing, let me go back into edit mode. Each one of these panels has a cogwheel that allows you to go in there and edit it again. I can have it in table mode, I can have it in bar mode, I can have it in column, line, or whatever you want. Pie chart if you want to as well. So you can tweak it. You can play with if you want it stacking. You can play with if you want to change the y-axis. Perhaps you want to use a different color range. In here, you can do that as well. What you cannot change from here is the query. So you notice I clicked on query, but it's grayed out. It does not allow me to change the query. And the reason for that is because we want to make sure that you don't have a broken dashboard. If you ever want to edit the query, you have to be looking at the dashboard, go to the query itself, make the change. Let's say that I cared, I want to get rid of that. I just don't want the 200s. Get rid of that. Run the query, make sure that the query works. And if it does work, then you can just update your dashboard, right? And it says, okay, do you want the time frame you just ran it for or the original time range, which is last 60 minutes? I say that. And now my dashboard has been updated with a new query. But I want to make sure that that query worked. Last but not least the last thing about dashboards is this live mode piece here. Essentially, if I'm going to use this dashboard as forensics to just run queries and investigate things, then I use it as I have been in this last few minutes. But if I will be showing this dashboard up on my operations center and I want it to refresh automatically, then I would turn it on into live mode. This means that it's going to create a query in the back end, and it's going to have that query updated, and those dashboards are going to be always running and ready for you. I'm going to turn it off because I don't want this to be running in the background, just generating that. But essentially, you run it, and it takes a minute or so to fill up with data, and then it will be automatically filled as you're running with that kind of stuff. All right, so I talked a lot about dashboards. The last thing I want to talk about is, and by the way, you can try these labs that show you how to do it. The last thing is I'm going to quickly talk about alerts. Alerts are actually pretty easy to build. Let's take, did I have a query called outliers or something like that? Yeah, I'm going to take that query. So what alerts allow you to do is, what if I want to be alerted every time I have that little pink triangle in here? You'll notice that little pink triangle. I'm rushing through this just because you'll see, for those of you who will be on tomorrow, you'll see it with more detail. What that does is it creates a new field where the count violation is set to 1. So if I always want to show you only those data points that have that pink triangle, I would say where server error count violation is greater than 0. So that means it's only going to show me results. Oops, I forgot the where clause here. Where server error count violation is greater than 0. So I can see results if there's any issue. If there's no issues, I would get no result in here. So let's say that I wanted to save this query. One of the things that I have available to me when I'm saving a query is the ability to schedule that query. So I can schedule it, say that I want it to run, let's say, every hour, and I wanted to go and grab the last 3 days worth of data, or in this case, the last 60 minutes worth of data. I can choose a time frame that I want it to run. I want it to always run in DST, and I wanted to send me an alert every time a condition is met. Or probably more interesting, I only want you to send me an alert if the number of results is greater than 0. Why does this work? If I don't have any pink triangles, then I'm going to get no results. But if I have pink triangles, meaning that I have outliers, then I'm going to get results in here. So my results are going to be greater than 0. And then I can have this email me the info. So I can specify my email in here. Let's say I would email my Yahoo account at sumo.com or Sumo. I can create an email subject of what I want it to be, and then I can say what are the things I want to include on that email itself. For those of you joining tomorrow, I will talk more about these different options, but you have the ability to send it through a webhook. So you can send it to PagerDuty, to a Slack, and a few of these other options as well. All right, so essentially creating an alert is pretty straightforward. For those of you joining tomorrow, there's talk about how to create meaningful alerts, so how to avoid the false positives as well. Good. Last but not least, the last few things I want to talk about is I've been talking a lot about logs for troubleshooting. What about metrics for monitoring? So some of you have already started to delve into metrics. So remember, you have the ability to do log overlay, right? That was the ability to put my my logs kind of on top of that metrics query so that I can see when the relevant logs are showing errors compared to what's happening with my metrics world. Remember this screen here? Let's see if it's still showing. Actually, it was here, CPU and total memory. Come on. Yeah, remember that I ran this query where I was showing the namespace and the logs that were on top of that? So that's the ability to overlay your logs with your metrics as well. With metrics, you can bring data from host metrics, you can bring AWS metrics, which traditionally get sent to CloudWatch, or if you have Graphite formatted metrics, you can bring them from CollectD, StatsD, DropWizard, and so on. For metrics, you can have the same thing as you can with alerts. You can still add panels to a dashboard. You can still create alerts, which allow you to have a critical and a warning and a missing data levels as well. So very similar to what you just saw in the logs world, you can do with your metrics. All right. So with that said, I've covered quite a lot. The good news is I'm recording this, so if you ever need to go back, you can. Where do you go from here? I mentioned it before, but there is that Learn tab. I'm going to show it to you one more time. In your own instance, let me just close all these here, close all these tabs. So in your own instance from the Home tab, you have a Learn tab in here. And this Learn tab is great because it has a lot of shorter videos that help you, that will introduce LiveTail, maybe a quick intro to search. They also have the tutorials that we highly recommend you try, both for using Sumo as well as setting up Sumo. And you also have links to docs, to community, to what's new, to the cheat sheets and whatnot. So highly recommend that you try those out. But most importantly, get certified. You will find out that you actually know a lot more than that you actually think as you start going through these. And certification helps like a good way of trying it out. You have 3 tries, so if you fail in the first one, you still got 2 more. And most, I would say 100% people have passed. But just to keep it safe, I will say 98 of people have passed. So certainly you'll have a good chance of that. So let me pause here for now and open it up to queries, to questions. Sorry. What I'm going to do for now is I'm going to stop the recording, but it's open up to questions, which you can send through the Q&A window.